Welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega. I'm here with my special guest, Nick Vale. Nick, good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Okay, and we're at it. This is like show number 189. The theme of this show is free will and enlightenment. The basic idea behind this is like, if you read some books by people who claim to be enlightened, by like Deepak Chopra and these gurus, these yogis, these philosophers, these psychologists who, you know, maybe they meditate a lot. I mean, I meditate a lot. It's not that meditation is wrong or negative. It's very helpful and all. But some people claim to have this special knowledge. They claim to have this wisdom above others. They claim to be, quote unquote, enlightened. And so, like, I have witnessed a lot of their statements relative to this idea of free will, whether we have a free will or not, and they are so deeply mistaken. You know, in other words, they believe that they have a free will. So basically, I was telling Nick before the show, basically a great litmus test for how both intelligent a person is and how enlightened a person is whether they believe in free will or whether they understand that free will is an illusion, has always been an illusion, and must always be an illusion for reasons we've explained in 188 previous shows. Well, I'm sure we'll explain it again in this show. All right, but again, like what we always do before the shows, let's go into a basic, we're going to define what these quote-unquote enlightened celebrities and, you know, yogis, philosophers say, mean what they say, they have a free will, and then we'll basically describe why we're doing this show, because this isn't a trivial matter. This matter is very important, not just to individuals, but to the world as a whole. So Nick, start us out. What do these gurus, these self-proclaimed enlightened people who, you know, much more often than not are not enlightened, they're kind of like false prophets. What do they mean when they say that we human beings have free will?
Okay, usually you want me to define what it means to not have. Okay, free will means basically that your life is up to you. That's what they're saying. Right. So again, that's the easiest way of describing it.
Yeah, and let's describe it in different ways so people get a
But I'm here to tell you that everything is a conditioned response based on one's personal history, going towards pleasure and away from pain.
Absolutely. That's just one refutation of free will.
You have no choice but to do that.
In other words, let's explain why we don't have free will, you know, define it in that sense. So free will basically means that things are up to us, right? But if we're hardwired biologically, this is a basic motivation in all human beings and in many, many organisms to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Obviously, all of our behaviors, all of our actions, all our decisions are going to be aimed toward that purpose, those purposes. And where's the free will in that? We're as programmed in what we do in seeking pleasure and avoiding pain as a computer is in doing its algorithms to come up with whatever it does. Okay. Again, I want to be really sure you understand like what these self-proclaimed but really unenlightened people mean when they say they have free will. They're basically saying that we can decide what we want to, independent of our genetics, independent of our environment, independent of what we've learned, what we haven't learned, our level of intelligence, all these factors that actually in reality combine to make us who we are and make us decide as we do. Okay, now let's go into again, because it's important you understand why we're doing this show. This isn't just we're not doing this just as a trivial, I mean, it's important. First of all, Nick, let's just go into the truth factor, because I mean, there are a lot of practical benefits to understanding this on a personal and global level. But let's just go through the science of this. Why is this important as a scientific truth?
I think the show's important because, we're told as kids that honesty is the best policy. And as human beings who've come to Earth and we're conscious creatures, the animals aren't talking to each other about philosophy. We're the only species that can really self-reflect on what we're doing here. And we've tried other ways of living. Free will, just doesn't seem to be working. I don't know if you've noticed that terrorists are beheading people on YouTube and the world is not in a good state. So I think, we should try the actual truth way. So I don't think we could do any worse. The free will belief invites a lot of hatred and escalating violence and eye for an eye. So I think even if the no free will paradigm were equal, it's still the truth. And actually, even if it was, I don't see how it could be any worse than what we're doing now, but I think the show's important because we have an obligation as a species to get this right.
Absolutely. This is like the way this free will belief is completely delusional. Our entire world almost. There are some people that get it. Some scientists, some philosophers get that we don't have a free will. But the vast majority of people believe we have a free will. Actually, I just got to mention, New Scientist in 2012 came out with a cover story. New Scientist is a British science magazine. Their cover story in April 2012 refuted free will. It challenged free will, and in it there was a phrase saying that actually about 30% of our world doesn't believe in free will. So it's not like as if we're hardwired to have this belief.
Wasn't there a cover story in Scientific American also?
Yes, there was a cover story in Scientific American,
Right.
and actually just last month, a cover story by BBC's science magazine called Focus, the British broadcasting company. So yeah, this is getting out there. More magazines, books, papers have been written on free will over the last 5 years than in all of the previous time combined. That's how major this is getting. But again, in terms of like why this is important, aside from Nick was going through the practical benefits of like creating a more peaceful, understanding, intelligent world, this is about truth. Our world is deluded about who we are as human beings. We're ascribing to ourselves powers and abilities that are reserved for God or the universe. I mean, like, I tend to be a pantheist. To me, like, God and the universe are synonymous. Okay? So basically, whether you're a theist or a naturalist, basically, we're not in control of things. So that's
What about
important.
people who say the determinism or no free will belief is a defeatist attitude and it can rob people of their personal accomplishments? What do you say to these people who think we're depressing them?
Well,
Is honesty still the best policy?
The simple answer to that is Darwin understood that free will is an illusion, and Darwin went on to, evolution is among the very top, along with this free will discovery, incidentally, because like I'll get to it in a few minutes, whatever. But Darwin understood that we didn't have a free will. He went on to do something great. Einstein, perhaps our greatest scientist ever, he understood that free will is impossible.
Yeah, but I'm talking about regular people who are watching the show. Let's stay away from the world's top business, just school teachers, firemen, police officers, politicians, businessmen, lawyers, doctors who are successful, who are watching the show. Do you feel that you're robbing them of their personal accomplishments and giving people kind of a defeatist attitude that nothing's up to them?
Okay, this is a good point.
They may not be motivated to be a heart surgeon.
Let's go right. So a lot of quote-unquote enlightened figures like Chopra and all,
Yeah.
they kind of say like, we're empowering people with this belief in free will. If they believe they have a free will, then they'll be empowered to do more, to have more control over their life. Okay, that's the basic gist of it. But the problem with that is he's confusing free will with willpower. There's a lot of research on willpower. We can do more to increase our willpower. But willpower is just like, in other words, let's say I want to lose weight, okay? So I'll eat less. I'll try to diet, I'll exercise, whatever, do what I need to do. And that's willpower. Now here's the thing is like, whether I succeed or not, how much I succeed, that's not up to me. That's free will. So fine, like we do exert willpower to do what we need to do. And the other part of this, Nick, is like, so you're asking, why won't people who understand, as they understand that nobody has a free will, why will they continue to kind of like be motivated to do things? Basically, as we teach, our actions have consequences. For example, if we never get up, if we stay in bed all day, things happen. If we go to work, if we spend time with taking care of our lives, better things happen. This, and even like some people, Sam Harris wrote about this in his book. Other people have written this. Just try to live with this mindset. Well, I don't have a free will, so nothing that I do matters. I guarantee you, after like even a few minutes, you're going to understand that is neither a wise nor productive mindset. So basically, again, it's the reason we are hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's the reason why understanding that we don't have a free will is not going to basically limit our motivation. It's not going to limit our ambition, because we're hardwired. Again, we can't but like do what we predict is going to create a better future for us.
We have to assume that the truth will beat lies, you know, so even if people believe that it's kind of a defeatist attitude, which once you get the hang of it, it isn't, and we're actually robbing people of personal accomplishments, it's still better to live in the truth. I mean, the fairy tale of free will, you can't be good because it's just not the truth. So if you have a whole society with the wrong underpinning of consciousness, the wrong foundation of consciousness, you can't help but wonder, you know, what other misconclusions or mistakes are made from that premise.
Yeah, let's.
So, you know, it's very important to get this right. Now, can you tell people why it's not a defeatist attitude? Because, you know, sometimes I wrestle with that. You know, why should I do anything? I mean, I know what the answer is when hearing.
Right, okay, basically, we do things because if we don't, then the situation gets worse. And if we do certain things, it gets better. Again, fine, we don't have a free will, but what we do matters. You know, okay. That's what people have to understand. Yes, we don't have a free will. What we do and what we don't do is ultimately not up to us, but we're kind of conditioned to seek pleasure, avoid pain. We're conditioned to be good, to not do what we consider as evil. You know, we have a reason imperative. We're considered to do what's reasonable rather than what's irrational. So all these basic motivations that actually demonstrate why we don't have a free will ensure that as we understand that we don't have a free will, we're not just going to basically become indifferent to our lives and to the world around us.
What about personal responsibility?
Well, with personal responsibility, let's say you have a family and kids, right? You're going to do what you do not because you have a free will. In other words, like, your free will isn't going to be compelling you to work and take care, raise your family and, you know, feed them and clothe them and all that stuff. It's your sense of love and responsibility. You know, that doesn't change. And as a matter of fact, you know, some people say, like, without free will, life loses meaning. Think about it. What we value most in life is probably love. I mean, happiness is probably quintessential, but like love is a very, very powerful means toward happiness. And we understand we can't choose. We do not, as human beings, choose with whom to fall in love. And like, if we're lucky, the love lasts and the love grows and people stay together like married people and all. But we know from our statistics that doesn't always happen. So if we had a free will, you know, we would like fall in love with whomever we wanted to, and basically would maintain that. So, and the other thing is, like, we value this love, all of us understanding that none of it, it's really not up to us. You know, like, we're lucky to have this quality.
So these gurus you spoke about before, Deepak Chopra, Joel Osteen, your neighborhood rabbi, minister, priest, or cleric, or the Kabbalah Center, you're saying they tell people there's free will because they believe it's an empowering belief?
Actually, I don't know. I don't think so, because I'm glad you brought...
Well, you're saying it's more marketable. People like to believe in free will, but that's no reason to you know, just because you want something to be true doesn't make it true. You're right. They're telling people what they think people want to hear. And I'm glad you brought the religions into this, because this isn't just like New Age spiritual people like Chopra. This is like, you know, basic Judaism, Orthodox Jews. This is Christians. This is Muslims. This is even Buddhists. Many Buddhists believe in free will. Hindus to a lesser extent, but the five major religions, they buy into this. Why? Because like these religions that we have are not based on reason or science. They're based on some guy like a few thousand years ago said, well, you know, I talked to God and God told me that we have a free will. So like, and God told me that whatever God tells me is right, is irrefutable. So you got to believe it. They believe this because they read it somewhere and they were just like gullible. Guys like Joel Osteen would say, use your free will to find God's will for you. So you really have to make one free will decision, and then everything is no free will. But that decision to find God's will for you has a causal history to it, based on your nature and nurture.
Exactly.
So you have to. So these guys are like, you know, make one free will decision, and then everything else is God's will.
Right, and think about it.
Find Jesus.
Yeah, Nick, that is so good. And so, like, basically, they say to you, like, you know, choose God. Choose God. Well,
right.
You know, because it's the right choice, because your life will become so much better. Fine, it may, I don't know. But the idea is that, like, if it was that easy, if it was that, you know, basic and all, if we had a free will, who among us wouldn't choose God, right? So basically, they're saying, like, to choose something that obviously is not in our power to choose. Okay, so again, like with these religions, so they believe what they believe because, like, you know, it's in these books, and they say, and the books say, well, the book right here on page whatever says that this book is the Word of God and all. So they're saying because the book that says it's the Word of God, it's the Word of God. In other words, I could write a book tomorrow saying, like, and God told me that this is the newest testament. This is like, you know, this is, and so like people would read that according to this logic, will say, well, you know, the book says this, so it must be true. It is so illogical, and it is actually so harmful to this world. If you
obviously human beings write books, and human beings are fallible. So, but in theory, everything is God's will. So if I write a book and you write we've written books saying there's no free will. Why are we any less not God? I mean, we're conduits. Everything's God because there's no free will. So my book is just as valid as any other book.
Yeah, and actually, Nick, you know, we are actually defending religion more so than kind of like trying to tear it down, because basically, you know, all right, I'm a pantheist. I believe that God and the universe are synonymous. There are two fundamental attributes. There's three or four maybe to God, but the two of the main ones is God is all-powerful, okay? When you think of what all-powerful or omnipotent means, that means that what God goes, and what he doesn't want to happen won't happen. That means we can't have free will because everything is God's will. So basically our message to the world, to these people who claim they're enlightened but they're not, is that no, if you think you understand God and you believe in free will, you're clueless in terms of who God is, what God is, because you're ascribing to yourself a power reserved only to God. Okay, that's...
Oh, I get it. You're saying people who believe in free will are actually saying they're little gods.
Exactly. And so, yeah,
right.
Okay, so again...
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's crazy, yeah.
And
we're not little gods. We're human beings in a deterministic universe.
And how this is useful because, like, you know, there's a lot of people on TV and on the internet claiming they're enlightened, claiming they know more than others, and this free will question provides a very simple, powerful, pretty much irrefutable test of whether they're enlightened.
A lot of people think free will versus determinism is a philosophy debate reserved for philosophical discussions by adults or a philosophy class in college, and it should be left there. And these two guys, Nick and George, have the show where it's our opinion that we're in favor of determinism. You know, so they'll just put our stuff as an opinion, but they don't see it as, you know, a cold hard fact that there's no free will, and they poo-poo it as just a philosophy class. Tell everybody why it shouldn't just be, it should be current events, or what should it be? Current events or self-help?
Science. It's science, dude.
But it's not just philosophy class. It's everything
class.
No,
it's science. In other words, like...
It's more than science. Religion, too.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fact that we don't have free will is not opinion. In other words, there's certain aspects...
And it shouldn't just be reserved for philosophy class, that's my point.
Exactly. There's certain aspects of the universe that are irrefutable. You can't deny them. For example, reality exists. You cannot deny that reality exists, okay? Reality exists. Reality is in motion, okay? You cannot deny that, because if reality wasn't in motion, if things weren't moving around, nothing would happen. This show wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be watching this. Absolutely nothing would happen. So, like, what is motion? Most fundamentally, according to physics, motion is a particle at a position at one moment in time and at a different position the next moment in time. That is the definition of motion. And so, like, when you understand that, then you obviously you say, well, there was a cause. There's a cause for the particle to shift its position from one position to the next. And in science, we refer to that as momentum. Momentum propels particles from one place to the other. So momentum and causality are just as irrefutable facts in our universe as are the facts that the universe exists and that it's in motion. So again, like you're saying, this is not a matter of opinion. This is a matter of not just of scientific fact, but also of logic.
But for example, Sam Harris, the 3-time New York Times bestseller, wrote a book called Free Will, and it's just kind of put in the philosophy section as an opinion in philosophy. I don't think he got how big this is. That the free will question is the umbrella consciousness all over on top of the earth. So it's not just a philosophy class. It's like life class. It's life 101. There's no free will. So it shouldn't just be put in, you know, a philosophy section. It should be in either current affairs or, I don't know, I don't know, self-help or...
No, it's much...
Should just be, yeah.
Nick, this relates to everything.
Everything, so I don't know what... Nobody goes to philosophy sections anyway.
Here's how big this is.
That's what I'm saying.
Right now, our human species, we're referred to as Homo sapiens. Homo referring to man, sapiens referring to that we're knowledgeable, right? But as long as we believe in free will, we're not very knowledgeable. So we, as the world, evolves away from this free will belief, and this probably will happen over the next 10, 20 years, because like we don't go into this in this show, but it's important for the world to get this for certain geopolitical reasons. But as we evolve into this, so after 50 years, after 60, 70 years, there'll probably be a new designation of human beings away from Homo sapiens into some new kind of like term that describes us with this fundamentally new perspective on reality. That's how big this is. You're right, Nick. It's not just about science. It's not just about theology. It's about consciousness.
What I'm saying is I can guarantee a way for a book not to sell. Put it in the philosophy section. So if you're going to write books refuting free will and your literary agent, Sam, or your publisher says put it in philosophy, no one... That's esoteric and academic, and it's not going to be the world's most important thing. This show deserves the world's #1 movie, the world's #1 book, CNN debates with the world leaders. This is the topic of all topics. It's not just philosophy. That's boring. Nobody likes philosophy.
I agree with you.
I mean, if, academics do. You're talking about 0.01%. This is a topic that needs to be on CNN immediately, and with you and I hosting.
And Nick, it's not just our opinion. You're completely right. This philosopher, eminent American philosopher, John Searle, if you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, he's ranked number 13 in terms of how often he's cited by other philosophers. So he's not just an ordinary philosopher.
Again, it's still philosophy. It's still
right, no, I know. Yeah. But he says, he's a philosopher, he gets it. He says, like, for our world to understand that free will is an illusion would be a bigger revolution in our thinking than Einstein or Copernicus or Galileo or Newton or Darwin. Then he goes on to say it would alter our whole conception of our relation to the universe. That's how big this is.
Right, but academics, philosophers, teachers, scholars, we need politicians, school teachers, religious leaders, cultural leaders, shows like this with the people, for the people on CNN. So anything to do with philosophy won't get the word out. I mean, please don't call this a philosophical debate.
And we also need
it's a life debate,
yes,
right?
And we also need an easy way to distinguish between false prophets who claim to be enlightened and they're not, and true scientists or people who really know what they're talking about. Because, for example, with evolution, to a great extent we have to rely on the experts. With climate change, to a great extent we have to rely on the experts. This question of whether we have a free will or not is so basic, it's accessible to everyone. A fourth grader can understand this.
Why do you keep saying this is science?
Well, because
this is religion. This is God's will. This is everything. This is not just science.
Well, again, I'm a pantheist.
Again, I know, but you're making it sound like this is a scientific debate. This is a logical conclusion. It is the only coherent, logical explanation for human behavior. If you really think about it, how people even commit evil. Who, with their own right mind or with their free will, would choose to be depressed, angry, commit suicide, homicide, do quote unquote evil? So. I don't like when you say it's science, that's turning off.
No, Nick, you're right.
It's not science, it's everything.
It's logic. It's like, in other words, the basis of science, for science, is logic. Scientific method is based on cause and effect. That's a logical construct. Our math is based on logic. Everything is based on logic. So in other words, like, if you want to know, who you should, like, there's some people who claim to be intelligent and enlightened in the world, but they're not. So this question of free will provides us, the rest of the world, with a simple means of testing them. If they're claiming to be enlightened and they're saying that we have a free will, you can guess, one, that they're not very logically intelligent. They may have a good memory, whatever, but they're just very poor at critical analysis skills. And two, they're certainly not enlightened. Because if they're claiming that free will is such a fundamental delusion. In other words, like understanding who we are as human beings, the fact that nothing is up to us is so fundamental a fact that if they don't get that, then you can be sure that they probably don't get a lot of other things they're saying.
But it's not the domain for just philosophers and scientists. It's the domain for every regular person. It's not just the intellectuals that we kind of think we are, even super intellectuals like Sam Harris. I don't see why regular people at Starbucks who have regular, either blue collar jobs, UPS drivers, taxi drivers. Anybody can understand that free will doesn't exist and have a conversation about it. So please stop, pigeonholing it as this esoteric, philosophical, scientific thing. It's an explanation for human behavior that everybody should be talking about all the time.
Yes.
And mostly our political leaders have to step up, and religious leaders. So, it bores people to say it's, you're quoting John Searle, philosopher. Regular people they'll just tune out if you keep saying that.
But Nick, I agree with you.
Philosophy is boring. Nobody likes it. It's a lot of jargon. We're not using
jargon.
Than that.
No, it's more than that.
The only jargon I've used is the word determinism. I try not to use fancy words.
I hear you.
Because this isn't a fancy show. But if you heard philosophers debate this, you can't, like Dan Dennett, you can't understand half of what they're saying.
I know.
Deepak Chopra, cosmic consciousness.
Nick, that's important.
Yeah.
Philosophers intentionally obfuscate on this. They try to make it more complex than it is. But basically, this question of whether we have a free will basically regresses, basically devolves to just simply one is everything caused? One condition, one factor of analysis. If everything is caused, then free will is impossible. And if you try to refute the fact that everything is caused, then you get things that are not caused. And applying that to free will, that makes free will even more impossible. That is how simple this is. And that's the point you're making. It's not science. It's not philosophy. It's not fundamentally religion. It's basic logic that a fourth grader can understand.
What I'm saying is, if we ever made a movie refuting free will, it should be for the mass market. Stop with the academics and philosophers and scientists, and let's get a G-rated movie that anybody, can understand. It's not. It's just life.
I agree.
There's no such thing. The illusion of free will is the mythical monster of the times we live in, and it needs to stop. And this show, thanks to George, is the first step.
Yeah, to the extent that we as human beings believe we have a free will, we are clueless in terms of who we are as human beings.
Yeah, right.
To the extent we understand we don't have a free will, we begin to understand what our place is in the universe. So we might consider ourselves a part of God, like this hand is a part of me, but we're just not the part of God that makes decisions. Thanks for watching.